G'day guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I will be doing a bit of a different type of tipping video. I won't be doing any tips. I'll be going through what occurred in the final round of the season, round 23. Just in case you were wondering, no, my finals predictions will not be in this video. So if you guys were wondering when they're going to be coming out, they'll be coming out very, very soon. That's for sure. And again, like I mentioned in my Collingwood review earlier, I'm very, very sorry for not getting this out when it was supposed to come out about nearly a week ago now. But anyway, let's jump straight into it. Round 24 was a pretty good round for me with tips, and it was a very, very interesting one to end off the season. First game was obviously Collingwood versus Essendon at the G. I attended it. It was a superb performance by the Pies, getting the job done by 70 points in a very dominant performance. My big call was Jamie Elliott to kick a goal after the siren to win the game, but he was subbed out at half-time with an injury, so that obviously didn't occur. Now, North Melbourne versus Gold Coast. This was a very unexpected result. North Melbourne getting the job done pretty comfortably as well down in Tassie, scoring a massive score. Getting the win and getting rid of Harley Reid, sending him straight back to West Coast. It was very interesting to see what they were doing there. My big call was North were in front at half-time and they were just down, so I was pretty disappointed with that one. But moving on to Hawthorn versus Fremantle. Another upset, in my opinion. I thought Hawthorn would get the job done, but Freo got the win, a pretty comfortable win in the end. My big call was Hawthorn to kick 4 last quarter goals, and that didn't occur. Now moving on to a very interesting game and a low-scoring game at the Gabba. It was Brisbane versus St Kilda. Brisbane getting the job done just, though they weren't perfect in that one. And my big call was the Saints to lead for more in the first half, and that did not occur. And then moving on to the two other Saturday night games, was the first being Geelong versus Western Bulldogs down at GMHBA. The Bulldogs obviously had to win to make finals. They did get the job done. I tipped the Cats, and to be fair, I didn't really know about all the changes they were making at the time when I tipped them. So I would have probably changed it, but I just couldn't be bothered, really. My big call, Ollie Henry kicked 4 more goals. Didn't occur. Kicked 3. I was close, though. Really wanted to get that one correct, despite me hating him. And then West Coast versus Adelaide was a pretty easy one to get right. Adelaide getting the job done comfortably to end off their season with a bit of a high after their controversy the weekend before. And my big call was Rankin and Tex to combine for 10 or more goals. They combined for 9. Rankin didn't kick any, and Tex kicked 9. He was superb, Tex. Definitely didn't disappoint, but yeah, unfortunately another incorrect big call. Moving on to the Sunday. Now, this one was a bit of an interesting one. Port Adelaide versus Richmond. I did tip Port Adelaide, so nice correct tip there. But my big call was Richmond to be in front for longer, and they weren't, so that was pretty disappointing. Sydney versus Melbourne was a very interesting and close game. Was pretty unexpected, really, but Melbourne did get the job done, and my big call was Melbourne to be up by 30 or more points at any point in the match, and that was a fail. So, not great. And then the final game of the home and away season was a beauty. Carlton versus GWS. It was a huge upset by the Giants. One that I correctly tipped somehow. Don't know how I tipped that one. I was kind of tipping GWS to take the piss. But they ended up winning, so I'll definitely take that. And my big call, there were I predicted that there'd be 5 or more lead changes in the second half, and there was no lead changes. Very interesting. 6 out of 9, great for tips. 0 out of 9, horrible for big calls. Bit of a weird one. And now, instead of going through every game and what every team did right or wrong in the round, obviously, because you can't really do that, I'll be going through most of the teams and in this one. So I'll be going through first Essendon. They had a really, really disappointing performance. Brad Scott's already come out and made list changes. They've delisted players. They said farewell to Tipper and Phillips. But apart from that, they were horrible, very, very inaccurate, only kicked 3 goals. Shocking performance by them. They've got a lot of work to do on the off-season. They just look tired and fatigued in their final month and a bit, which was quite devastating for them. Now, Collingwood obviously had a superb performance, one that hopefully can get a bit of confidence back into the playing group before the finals. Jack Ginnivan was absolutely superb, kicked 3 goals, same with Brody Myercheck. Jordan Agoe, Tom Mitchell were massive in the middle for Collingwood, so it was a really good game for us, and hopefully we can move on, get some defenders back for the final. Then North Melbourne had a really good performance. Nick Larkey, obviously superb, kicked 9 goals. Doesn't get any better than that. Their midfield was pretty good. Their forward line worked well. So, yeah, they'll definitely take it. Gold Coast, on the other hand, were pretty awful. And, you know, they've come out and said, Jim has got a bit of work to do after all. You can't be losing to a team that's lost 20 in a row. Hasn't won since almost 6 months, and to come out and lose like that, it was horrible for the Gold Coast Suns. A very disappointing way to end off their season. Ended up in a bottom 4 result, can you believe, for the Gold Coast Suns? It gets worse, so a horrible day for them. Now, Hawthorn, this one was a bit of a flat game for them. They just didn't look on, to be honest. Fremantle just looked way better, and they actually finished the season off alright, Freo, so getting some games in the young fellas as well. Tom Emmett was absolutely superb in just his second game. Brayshaw and Sarong were huge as well, so maybe the Finn McGuinness tag didn't quite work. He was sent to Ryan for the most of the first half. It was very interesting. It was also interesting to see both these teams play players out of positions. I mean, I guess you can do that final game of the season. Didn't mean absolutely anything for the club. Oh, except Fremantle, actually. They didn't get bottom 4 because they won, so it meant a little bit for them. Luke Jackson was really good. Brendan Cox played forward. It was interesting. Scrimshaw played forward for Hawthorn, so that was also interesting for them. And, yeah, it was a good win for Freo. Brisbane, they were fairly dominant, especially in that first half against the Saints. They were really, really superb, but just inaccurate, and you do not want that in a game before the finals. Obviously, you hope it's just a one-off, but we've seen Brisbane play inaccurate heaps and heaps of times before in many different years, and especially in the finals, so it's not good. Confidence would be pretty low for them after a performance like that right before the finals against, you know, a team that's also going to be in the finals in the Saints. And to be fair, the Saints were pretty poor in the first half. They just couldn't get the ball out of the front half of the ground, and yeah, they've got to just simply do better. Their second half was a lot better though. They looked really good around the goals in the second half, capitalised well. Tim Membry looked good in Max King's absence, so King will be a huge inclusion for their final. And then Geelong, they played a lot of young kids, raw kids. They played really, really well for 3 quarters, but dropped off in the last quarter. The Dogs ran over the top of them. It was a pretty predictable, almost, result in the end. The Cats being such a young side, it almost looked like it was going to happen, and it ended up happening. Unfortunately for me, who went to tip them at GMHBA. Western Bulldogs obviously had to keep their season alive. Obviously didn't end up making the finals, but still got a nice win to end off the season after a horrible result against West Coast the week prior. But yeah, very interesting for the Western Bulldogs. They'll have some off-season changes. In my opinion, they should be looking at sacking Bevo, but it looks like they're going to back him in, which is disappointing, in my opinion. I want to see someone else take over the remains of Bevo, and it just doesn't look like it's going to happen. But their forward line, at least, was really dangerous. But one thing that Matthew Lloyd, and I've got to say, Matthew Lloyd, he's a fantastic footy fanatic, and he picked up a really great thing about their season that no one else has picked up on, in my opinion. And that's Jamari Ugle-Hagan and Aaron Norton have both kicked the same amount of behinds as goals. Imagine that. Imagine if they capitalised on their chances throughout the season. maybe that's got a big, plot into the Dogs' inaccuracy. It was very interesting, but this is mainly talking about the two games prior to this Geelong game, that they still were very, very good, especially in that last quarter. And then moving on to West Coast, obviously Wooden Spoon, horrible result. It's been a horrible year. Gonna make heaps of off-season changes, though they have come out and said during the week that they're gonna back Simmer in to coach next season, so that'll be nice to see him, coach. Probably you'd think for maybe the last season. It really depends on what they do and where they end up after the draft and trade period, and even after the season's done. It'll be very interesting to see what happens to Simo next year. And Adelaide obviously got a really good performance. Tex Walker, ridiculous. Almost took out the Coleman, but unfortunately didn't. Their forward line was pretty good. Sligo played probably his best game of the season. Our midfield was great. Matt Crouch surely's earned enough to earn a contract extension after a performance like that, and it was a really good win for the Crows. And then Port Adelaide versus Richmond didn't really mean much for these two teams, though Port Adelaide did have to win to avoid finishing fourth and playing Collingwood in an away qualifying final. And they did that. They weren't great, Port Adelaide. They battled all the way. And managed to scrape off a nice, comfortable 30-point win in the end somehow, which didn't really sum up the result of the game, in my opinion. It was scrappy, it was close. Both teams, the most inaccurate teams as well this season, both these teams. And, both were very, very inaccurate. And, unfortunately for Richmond, didn't quite get the result they would have wanted in the final game of their disappointing year. A year which we'll see a lot of changes come for next season, that's for sure. But it was interesting to see James Trezois and Tom Brown make their debuts. So, that was a bit of a positive for Richmond, and a bit of a negative situation. But Port Adelaide had a pretty good game, and they'd be pretty happy with that result. Moving on to Sydney versus Melbourne. Sydney were pretty impressive. Actually, I wasn't expecting them to really do what they did, take it up for the D's and pretty much be better than them for 3/4 of the game. Obviously, didn't get the result, but it's still pretty nice feeling coming in with 6 wins and a narrow loss to a top 4 side heading into the finals. It gave them confidence. And a huge elimination final against Carlton at the MCG. They'd be hoping to maybe pull off a bit of an upset over the Blues, who did drop a game, which means they've obviously dropped a bit of their form. Maybe could surprise a few, the Swans. And Melbourne obviously was a pretty nice win heading into finals. Their form has been pretty good, but it was obviously soured by the ACL of Jacob Melksham. That is a horrible, horrible, horrible thing for Melbourne. Bit of a foot injury for Fritsch as well, but proved to be the hero in the end, kicking 3 final quarter goals to sink the Swans, and was pretty impressive. And it was also good to see Max Gawn play a really good game. With Grundy out, you feel that experiment is fully done, and Grundy will be finding a new club next season. And then the final game of the home and away season, Carlton were pretty disappointing, to be honest. They started off pretty well, obviously came out with, motivation and meaning. Curnow was pretty impressive early, kicked 2 goals, secured his back-to-back Coleman, so that was good for them. And they looked really good around the midfield early, Carlton, and they significantly dropped off in the midfield, which is a bit concerning. In my opinion, for Carlton to become a good side, their midfield has to get going. They need to feed the ball to Curnow and Mackay a lot. Their small forwards often do a lot of the work. Their defence has stepped up in recent times, though. Jacob Wiedering's been humongous. Just avoided a bit of a scare with Toby Green as well. That would have been horrible if he missed the game against the Swans. It would have definitely probably changed a bit of the odds, that's for sure, if he was going to miss. But yeah, GWS, great result for them. They've had 2 fantastic performances now heading into the finals, which will definitely give them confidence, belief, and momentum. I do believe they'll have a lot of momentum too heading into the finals. getting a nice win there. Unfortunately, though, Toby Bedford is suspended. But yeah, still be exciting to see the Giants back in the finals. Toby Green named All-Australian captain during the week as well. Was very, very good in this game, and yeah, their forward line really stepped up, played another good game, and they'd be pretty happy with their result, the Giants. So I hope you guys enjoyed the final round of the season. I hope you guys enjoy that. And yeah, stay tuned for my finals predictions coming out very soon on the channel.